Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is 𝐰𝐞'𝐥𝐥 and I'm a relationship manager at Turn Left Media based in Kenya. As many of you know, Turn Left Media is the exclusive media partner for LinkedIn in Sub-Saharan Africa and is now an alliance partner for LinkedIn's talent solutions as well. Agency and publisher relationships are key to delivering client value. Navigating these relationships can sometimes be tricky, with responsibilities often blurring. We are proud to welcome our amazing panelist, Frederick Bustrom, Director at the International Agency EMEA and LATAM at LinkedIn, Chris Botha, Group MD, Park Advertising, and Fred Kazenzi, Founder and CEO, Belva Digital, for deeper insights into maximizing these relationships. During the hour, we'll explore how agencies and platforms continue to find and deliver value for clients, how to manage direct relationships between clients and publishers, the agency-publisher relationship, and how it changed during COVID and continues to change post-COVID, innovations that have driven agency usage, and the buffer effect. And lastly, measurement, data, and responsibility. Now I'm going to hand over to Sam Olivier, Turn Left Media's Director of Operations and our moderator for today's conversation. Sam, over to you.
Thank you so much, 𝐰𝐞'𝐥𝐥. It is so great to be here today. I'm coming to you from a very cold, wet, and rainy Cape Town, but I'm going to be digging a little bit deeper and asking our amazing panelists a few questions that we've all been wondering about. But before we do that, I would like to just do a quick round of introductions. So as I introduce each of our panelists, in true Turn Left Media fashion, I'm going to ask them post the introduction to tell us something that's not on their LinkedIn profile. So something that's inspiring them, something that they've heard, read, or seen recently. It can be anything. So first up, I would like to welcome back our good friend of Turn Left Media, Frederick Bustrom. We've worked and engaged with each other before, and Frederick offers some amazing perspectives on the digital landscape. As 𝐰𝐞'𝐥𝐥 said, Frederick leads LinkedIn's agency relationships and partnerships across international markets in EMEA and LATAM. At LinkedIn, he empowers agencies and brands to reach, engage, and convert their professional audience at scale. As president of the International Advertising Association in the UK, Frederick directs the organizations in its aims to protect freedom of commercial speech, advance advertising in a responsible way, and support consumer choice and education in the industry. Wow. So Frederick, please tell us, what is not on your LinkedIn profile?
Hi, Sam. Hi, everyone. It's great to be back with the Turn Left Media crew, and thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be with you. So what's not on my LinkedIn profile? It was actually a question I was asked in my first ever meeting at LinkedIn, and it was sprung on me by my then boss in New York. And I had to think really quickly on my feet. And I've kind of kept using this one for most of my questions when I've had this. And it's actually that I have two different colored eyes. So one of my eyes is green and the other one is green and brown. So it's a bit of a defect, I guess, in the gene pool, but it's something that's always stuck with me, and it's something that I can always use in these instances. So that's my
amazing. That's incredible. Very unique. And I'm sure a conversation starts a lot of the time.
Yeah, difficult to see on the screen, but
yeah. Fantastic, thank you. Well, next up, I would love to welcome another Frederick, Fred Kazenzi. Fred is an established entrepreneur, a marketer, and founder and CEO of Belva Digital, which is an award-winning performance marketing agency headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya. It also has a presence in 22 markets across Africa. So Fred has been recognized by Nation Media Group as a top 40 under 40 businessman in Kenya, and Soma amongst the top 25 men in digital. Fred is a BSc computer science graduate, Previously, he's worked at Google and IBM, where he spent a considerable amount of time supporting businesses in Africa to meet their growth and digital transformation goals. So Fred, not to be confused with Frederick, please tell us what is inspiring you now and what doesn't feature on your profile.
Thanks, Samantha. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Yes, and well done, Samantha, with the pronunciation. Really well done. Second name. What's inspiring me at the moment is, I think through the adversities we've seen in pandemic, we've risen above, we've dug deep as human beings, as companies, as professionals. And I believe we found a winning pattern, a way to not just survive, but thrive. So it has been encouraging, I think, going from 2020 to a lot of what we are hearing in recession coming soon. So I believe we'll come out of this as better. I think we just need to dig deep. What's not on my LinkedIn is I support, I'm a fan of F1. I support Mercedes. It's been a horrible year, so it helps me like taste in that. So yeah, so it's been a tough year for anyone supporting Lewis. So we'll come out of it, I believe.
I am a huge F1 fan too, so I can relate. Amazing, Fred. And then last but certainly not least, I would love to introduce Chris Botha from SA. Chris is the Group Managing Director of Park Advertising, the owner of two of South Africa's most prominent media agencies, the Media Shop and Meta Media. A Bloemfontein boy by birth, Chris started his life in media when he was a student at the University of the Free State. He ran the local campus radio station and was the proud presenter of the sports show. But Chris then joined the Media Shop in January 2000, where he grew his media knowledge working on brands such as Nando's, Mini, Virgin, ABSA, and ShopRite Checkers. And Chris was appointed to the Media Shop management team in 2006 and to the board of directors in 2008. In January 2011, he made Group MD of the entire Media Shop operation. And in 2018, the group launched a new media agency called Meta Media. In 2013, he was chosen as one of the 200 young South Africans to look out for by the Mail and Guardian, and also as one of the top 40 under 40 in the media. He was chosen as the Media Rising Star by the owners of South Africa at the Most Awards in 2013. So with that introduction, Chris, we are so looking forward to hearing what is not on your profile.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me, and good morning, everybody, and nice to have everybody on the call. So not on my profile. So this year, probably a couple of weeks ago, I turned 45. So as a 45-year-old, I decided that, listen, for me, I want to try and at the tender age of 45, want to try and break my personal best in, I'm a runner, in 3Ks, 5Ks, 10Ks, 15 and 21. So I'm actually on this mission in life. I'm training 6 days a week at the moment to try and break my PBs at the age of 45 for 3, 5, 10, 15 and 21Ks. So yeah, so that's my what's keeping me awake at night at the moment, and something that's not on my LinkedIn profile.
Incredible. That is phenomenal. And I definitely feel motivated to get out and run more knowing that. Well, thank you guys. What a stellar panel we have today. And I'm so excited to get this conversation started. So Frederick, to kick us off, I would love to ask and know, how do you see the landscape now between publishers and agencies?
Thank you. So yeah, for me, given the increased scrutiny that our entire industry is under at the moment, right? We have more demands from our advertisers to deliver more value and more ROI. I feel it's critically important that we all collaborate more. So be it the platforms, be it the agencies, for the betterment of the advertiser. So I think long are the days when there should be competition between the publisher and agency, or for the client to really push down the fees of the agency. I think we're all in this industry together now, and coming out of COVID, I feel like this is critically important, especially also as we're looking at a potential downturn in the global economy. We at LinkedIn we're currently looking at how we as a platform can equip agencies with the data, insights, marketing products, partnerships to help them grow and help them grow their customers' business. That's the perspective that we have, because if the industry grows and the advertisers' business grows, that's the tide that lifts all boats, right? So I feel like that's really how I see it. And hopefully that's something that we can kind of move forward with now in this kind of post-COVID world and in this slight uncertainty when it looks at the global macroeconomy.
That's great. That's such a helpful overview. Thank you, Frederick. So Chris, looking at Frederick's answer, how has this changed for you in the past 5 years? And what would you predict would happen in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I think I echo Fred's thoughts. I think that split that existed many years ago between creative agencies and media agencies and the media owner and the client, I think that's disappeared entirely. I think the analogy I use nowadays is to say it's a bit like a chair with 4 legs, right? One of the legs is the client, one of the legs is the media agency, one of the legs is the creative agency, and one of the legs is the media owner of the platform. And the reality is, for a chair to be effective, you need all 4 legs working effectively and working together. So I think for me, if we talk into the future, I think that 4-party alliance, I think, is only going to have to get tighter and tighter. I mean, I've worked with John Bowles, who I know is on the call as well. I've worked with him for many years. And to think 20 years ago, to say that you would have a media owner and invite the media owner, beg the media owner to come into your business, to train your staff up on how to better use their platform, I think 20 years ago was an absolutely foreign concept. Nowadays, this is exactly what we're doing. We have to work so closely together because in the end, we've all got the same goal. So I think for me, that collaboration, I think, is something that is only going to increase more and more. And I'm very excited about that, by the way.
That's such a helpful analogy. I love that analogy of the chair and the 4 legs. And I think that also helps paint a picture. Is there anything that you would add from a South African perspective?
I think from a South African perspective, I'd like to call it the undoing project. I think we've had a very deep history of separation when it comes to media agencies having, like, basically acting as a barrier between themselves and the client. So I think that me, from a South African perspective, the big step is that let's call it the undoing project, in terms of really separating getting that out the way and truly working as collaborative partners.
Great, that's brilliant. Thank you, Chris. Fred, over to you. We're seeing more and more interest and expansion from publishers into Africa, and I'd love to know, how are you dealing with this on the ground in Kenya?
I think the main takeaway is the audience is very global. We more or less see content across the world, right? Like if you have interest in F1, we just spoke about it, interest in Man United and whatever it is, sport interests are. And that, I believe the publishers are seeing the same traction coming in from this side of Africa, and subsequently they are setting shop in Africa or creating content that is pro-Africa, which is very encouraging. And I think what we've seen especially in Kenya is there's quick adoption to it. Our average age is about 19 years, so we have a very young population that has access to internet, that is quite affordable, and they have access to all these platforms and mobile devices. So we're seeing the numbers are very encouraging, and there's no bias for both local and global. So just like we did M-Pesa, I think there's a lot of uptake for content, whether it's global or local.
Okay, that's great to hear. Thank you. Chris, I'm going to come back to you now and ask, how do agencies and platforms continue to find and deliver value for clients? And how do we find a symbiosis between publisher and agency interests, would you say?
I think, Sam, for me, when we talk about delivering value to our clients, I think our job as both from a platform and from an agency perspective needs to be addressed as what is our client's number one need, right? Because we might want to address something that is not our client's need. And if you speak to CMOs at the moment, I think the number one need for every CMO, and by the way, by implication for entire business, has to do with return on investment. I think proving that you are investing billions of rands and dollars of a business into something, I think and how it delivers an actual sales and value, I think is critical. So for me, I think as a holistic overview from a overall communication perspective, I think our jobs are relatively simple. I think we tend to overcomplicate it. For me, our job is fundamentally about connecting brands with consumers, right? A willing buyer and a willing seller, and our job is to introduce the two, right? From a platform perspective, it's about making sure that you've got enough willing buyers, and from an agency perspective, it's making sure that we get those willing buyers and the willing seller together in a room, right? But how do we do that in an accountable and an effective way? In terms of delivering value as an agency, I think our job is more and more about, and I would put it akin to being a conductor in a symphony. We've got all of these platforms that are all individual instruments, and they all deliver world-class performances, and they all do amazing things. Our job is to make them all work together holistically. So in terms of delivering value from a Robi perspective, I think that's critical for us. And I think we interact with thousands of media owners and platforms on a daily basis. So for us, it's about what impact do these platforms deliver and across the media funnel, and how we bring that to benefit for our clients. So I would say from an agency perspective, it's about having that role of orchestration across a plethora of platforms.
Brilliant. That's so helpful, Chris. And I'm loving these analogies. They're very helpful. Great. Fred, I wanted to ask, what for you are the most critical changes that you feel we need to make to face the future effectively?
I think I love what Chris is talking about, especially when it comes to value. Like, we all, most of the time, trying to justify every dollar we billing the client, from the basics of creative to content. And as I think all the parties, from the publishers to the client and the agency, the economy is heavily driven by that. We have to really evaluate ourselves. What are we bringing to the table? Because we have seen, for example, on the publisher side, the billing DMPs, right, like data management platforms, where previously they would just tell the client, we have a nice homepage, we get 4 million people coming here, place your nice banner here, you get a couple of clicks, tons of clicks. Who cares about the CTR, right? But now we're seeing the client is very concerned about not just the millions of impressions or the thousands of clicks, but what happens once the user leaves your publisher website to come to my website, to my application or my e-commerce site. So that's why we're seeing the publisher side saying, okay, we probably need to invest more in data. So perhaps we can sell, these are the sports fanatics, these are the moms, these are the young hippies and so forth. So then brands can also get more value. Then begs the question, where does agency come? Because we're seeing that relationship thinning between agencies, and client, because the clients is becoming smarter. Previously, agencies, we used to hog all their knowledge, right? We were the smarter ones on the table. Now the client is very smart, they know about these things. So they're able to directly, seek this value directly from the publisher. So as an agency, where do you come in? Are you coming in to support the content? Are you coming in to do dynamic creative optimization? Are you coming in as an analytics partner? Are you coming in to measure ROI? So I think all the partners sort of, especially the agencies and publishers, is to evaluate what we bring to the table, because we've seen that line really get, blurry over time. Yeah.
That's great. And I think so many people can relate to, some of those challenges and changes that we need to consider.
Yeah.
Frederick, I'd love to come back to you and ask, how do you deal with direct relationships between clients and publishers, making sure that there is value to the client and agency?
So at the end of the day, we all contribute to the success of the partnership or the campaign or the objectives that the customer have. We all have our individual roles to play within this ecosystem, right? Be it the platform, the client, or the agency. So personally, if the way I look at it, if a client has an agency on their roster, we should make sure as the platform that we align with the agency and the clients on the key objectives of that particular campaign and what we're trying to do, right? So we're all on the same page and we're all kind of contributing, working towards those. Agencies bring significant value to the partnership, right? They have a different perspective on kind of the overall media mix, the overall campaign, the various kind of platforms or publishers that they use for the campaign. So bringing that perspective into the conversation is critical. And I think sometimes you need that unbiased view, right, of the partnership, especially as you kind of working with, if it's a regional global campaign, to make sure that we cover all of the various bases. But saying that, I think it's also then critical for the platform and the brand to have a relationship. My friends over at 𝐰𝐞'𝐥𝐥, which is a global media consultancy company, like they always say to their brands that they advise, like, you should have a direct relationship with the 5-10 biggest media partners that you have, right? Because they are business critical to you as a CMO in order to achieve your objectives and report back up to the CEO and CFO on the board of what you're doing, how you're driving value for your business. But that doesn't mean that you should cut out the agency completely, right? So I think that kind of symbiosis where everyone kind of collaborates, it's going to be really critical. And the agency plays a hugely important part of that, as does the platform, as well as does the brand. So I think the days of kind of trying to cut people out or kind of being a gatekeeper, I think are long gone.
So good. So good, Frederick. I'm tempted to get you to repeat that. Thank you for that input. I'm going to move to our classic COVID question. So, Chris, how has the agency and publisher relationship changed during COVID and now post-COVID? This is such a hot topic, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Look, I'll be honest with you. I think, and I'm going to contradict myself in my answer, by the way. Let me just say that up front. I think it's changed for the worse, and I think it's changed for the better. I think certain things, and again, I'm a big believer in seeing people face to face, interacting with people. I think we've lost a lot of that. And because of that, I think we've become very transactional in our relationship. So I don't think the COVID relationship has improved. I think there's too much distance. I think we rely on things like email too much. I think the whole thing, okay, if you want to have a word with me quickly, you need to set up a call with me. I think that sort of complexity, I think, has dumped out a lot of innovation out of a relationship. So I think that I think has made our relationship far more transactional. I think that's led to lack of innovation, and I think it's led to a lack of customization as well. So I think, so for me, holistically, I don't think COVID has done wonders for us in terms of our relationship between platform and agency and client. However, at the same time, I also do think here we sit with somebody from Kenya, somebody from the UK, somebody from South Africa, somebody from Cape Town and Johannesburg, and we can all have this amazing discussion where a few years ago we might have had to jump on a plane and spend 2 or 3 days. So definitely there's been fantastic things that have come out of it, and that we can have this call, which is fantastic. And so I think there's great learnings out of it. And I think certain things have improved, but I've been encouraging a lot of our media owner partners, our platform partners, and our staff to get back to seeing people face to face again. There's just fundamentally something different that I think we're losing out on if we exclude this.
Yeah, to add to that, I think to Chris' point, I completely agree, right? I think it's been amazing to be able to connect with people very easily across various markets and various regions just via Teams, right? Or Zoom or kind of StreamYard. But I feel like the way that we worked whilst doing things virtually is we've solved for the immediate need at hand, right?
Exactly.
Whatever is on the agenda that we need to solve for, that's what we solve for on the video call. And it's been very efficient. But the kind of the things around and outside of that immediate need has not been dealt with. So the kind of the creative ideation that we can talk about, like things that you can that comes up when you sit across the table with someone, be it at breakfast, lunch, or just in a meeting, or kind of the conversations you have as you're kind of leaving the meeting. I think that's been missing. And I think it's been to the detriment of kind of the industry in general. So I think the fact that we are now opening things up and can kind of continue to work in this hybrid mode, right? Like we can continue to have conversations like this where we dial in from 4 different countries and cities. It's great, and have the Sub-Saharan Africa community on the chat with us. It's brilliant, but then that shouldn't take away from the kind of the face-to-face interaction that we need to have in order to kind of come up with great ideas to have a massive impact for our customers and our industry.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Definite pros and cons, but some great points mentioned there. And Fred, I'd love to hear what does it look like in your market at the moment?
I think I agree strongly with my fellow panelists that we've taken off the shelf. As you said, when you used to walk into a pitch and you bring all your guns out and you want to impress. You've got a couple of jokes you want to throw in, to break the tension and all. It's harder to do that over Teams, or any other virtual platform, because half the time, half the people there probably don't want to show off their faces. So hard to read reactions, hard to read. So it's from a relationship perspective, I think we have a bit of building up, and we've seen a bit of that craving. Remember when our curfew was lifted, we almost forgot what had happened over a year plus. People went back to the bars, like they were released from a cage, or went back to the malls. Like we were craving that social interaction. So I think we human beings, we love to connect with one another. This having the calls and the webinars is a great way to keep the conversation going, but occasionally it's important to invest in that element of physical touch. And a lot of discussions can be held in person that are greater for the industry at large. Some of the changes, previously we used to say competition, is the other party offering services similar to yourself. But with what COVID has done is you're noticing that consumer experience is grown even more important. That consumers would not necessarily leave the brand and one brand for another brand, but they would leave a brand if the experience is bad, not necessarily because it's a cheaper, less effective. They would stick with the experience. They're more keen on the experience as opposed to the brand itself. So we seeing more loyalty to problems. As you're saying, consumers are more loyal to the problems than they are to your brand. So as brands and agencies and platforms, what we're trying to build is a lot more focus on that experience and just being aware of the consumer needs and expectations. And then going further down, consumer is a huge, description. So trying to drill that down into the various segmentations, trying to achieve hyper personalization. I think we are all aware of, the cookie going away, and this comes up a lot. What's a plan? How are we preparing ourselves for that from publishers, agencies, platforms? And what's coming to be the truth is that we need to be very, very aware of our consumers beyond the usual demographics and so forth. Just trying to drill down to interest behavior, collect as much data as possible, make sense of it as well. So we've seen a lot of shift towards that in the last couple of months. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Fred. Chris, back to you. I'd love to hear what have been some of the innovations that have driven agency usage forward, would you say?
Listen, I think when we talk about innovation, I don't think I'm preaching to the choir when I say innovation is key, right? But I think what agencies have realized over the years is that innovation requires investment. And I think that's where in the past we've tried to come up with very many clever things, but without investing in it. So I think over the past 2, 3, 4 years, what I've noticed is that agencies have realized that innovation requires investment and have invested in it. I think in investment, for me, there's the two parts that we've seen big investment is investment in skill and investment in technology. So I think from a skill perspective, I know within our business, we're looking at basically building out a lot of hyper specializations. Basically, I think that's something that we're seeing more, especially in the digital world, where you're finding that the old days of having a jack of all trade who can do a bit of search, a bit of social, a bit of this, a bit of that, I think is disappearing. And I think there's a big requirement in investment in terms of having these specialists. It was interesting. I was on a call yesterday with a team that we do a little bit of work with in India. And in India, they have 750 search and social people, literally just sitting in one office, and they do search and social work across the globe. And similarly, so they've got an ad ops team. It was fascinating. Ad ops team of 300 people that do ad ops 24 hours a day. Literally, they work in 8-hour shifts. 100 people working 8-hour shifts. So I think that like hyper specialization to me is the one innovation / investment that I think I've seen. I think the other area is investment in technology. Again, I can't speak for all of the other agencies, but I do know that other agency networks are doing the same. We're part of the IPG network. IPG recently invested $2 billion in buying 𝐼𝐞'𝐥𝐥, one of the biggest data companies in the world. So I think that sort of investment, I think, is what drives innovation. And again, now we can have a debate around what you consider innovation to be, right? But I think investment in innovation, investment in technology, investment in people and hyper specialization, I think that's what keeps relevance for agencies and making sure that they remain innovative in their own way.
Brilliant. I'm going to jump to a question from someone who has joined this call. And Chris, it's for you. So we're going to stick with you. But the question is, we're recording all the good promises here, but seriously, as a publisher, what do agencies look to publishers for that you don't see often enough?
That is a great question. So let me answer it. I think that when it comes to publishers and agencies, and I'm going to use an example, so please be patient with me here, right? I think the reality is, and I'm going to use an analogy from the out-of-home industry. Okay, so in out-of-home, us as an agency, we're currently dealing with 180 out-of-home media owners, right? 180, right? So if our out-of-home team were to meet with each and every out-of-home platform for 1 hour a month, they would work 8.5 hours a day just in meetings with media owners. They would not be able to, they would not meet with a client. They will not be sitting in a status meeting. They will not be, and for what it's worth, I think the digital industry is as prolific, if not more prolific. So when it comes to media owners and media platforms and how we engage with them, I would say, and this might be challenging for some people to hear, but you have to earn your seat at the table, right? So I think that, so for me, that's a big thing to understand is just because you have a platform doesn't mean that a client or an agency is automatically going to listen to you and automatically going to give you an ear. What value do you bring that nobody else brings? For me, that's such a big thing to answer. If you can prove that you bring great value to a client and to an agency, I think you earn your seat at the table. So for me, that's a big one we need to fight for, is to make sure that, I think you spoke about it earlier, Fred, I mean, I turn left is a great example where you guys are our business partners. I think you don't move left or right without talking to you about what's happening on your platform. So I think that for me is a biggie, is earn your seat at the table by bringing great value and keep delivering.
Yeah, I can add to that as well, Chris. I think it's like, I remember speaking to my sales team before my role at LinkedIn when I had our sales team. I was like, I always spoke to them about when they go into an agency meeting, that's 45 minutes to an hour of time that they take away from whoever they're meeting with. I'm like, they will most likely have to take time outside of the normal 9 to 5 to make up for that hour. So like, make sure it's worth their time, because they will have to make up for that time outside of normal working hours. And if the hour they spend with you isn't worth their time, it isn't bringing value to their day-to-day or their customer, they will not take your meeting next time.
Yeah.
Right?
And the flip side is true. If it does deliver value, they'll want to spend more than an hour with you. So I think that's a very valuable input.
I think I'll jump in on the same as well, that publishers are heavily creative-led, just as agencies we were. I think they need now to start hiring more of analysts.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. I'm loving this conversation, and there's so much good stuff coming out. Frederick, I'd love to ask you, how do publishers approach agencies, and what does the buffer effect look like?
So again, I think talking about kind of follow up on what I said before, right? Like, I strongly believe like the best partnerships that I've had with agencies is when you basically have ourselves, the agency and the brand sitting at the same table, talking about the opportunities we have at hand and how we can collaborate to drive really impactful business value and growth for our advertiser, right? That's really where the magic happens, when everyone can sit around the table and talk. I think in order to do that, there requires a level of confidence, I believe, from the agency, in order to kind of bring the platform or the media owner close to their customer. And again, I think it's also, it requires a level of trust between the agency and the publisher in order to not break that trust and kind of repay that confidence. I think in some areas I've seen where the agency very much acts as the buffer, and they say like, you deal with me and then I will deal with my clients. And at the end of the day, like, no one can sell LinkedIn better than our sales team. Like I appreciate like the team within 𝐰𝐞'𝐥𝐥, a Chris agency or Fred's agency, like you have incredibly skilled people, but like you don't live and breathe your media like we do when we work for a publisher, right? But then what we need to do is never betray that trust. So I think it's to be kind of trust between us as a platform and the agency, but the agency needs to be confident enough in their relationship with their client to bring the client into that table and not fear that they will be like bypassed in some way or overlooked in another way, right? And I think it's that's the key thing. And I think, but that's what we need to do because again, the brand will understand their objectives really well. They will understand how we can collaborate and kind of contribute to those objectives, and the agency will be able to give their point of view. That kind of looks at the holistic media plan, the holistic campaign, and all the various aspects, like the 180 outdoor partners that you have. Maybe a few of them will be part of this campaign as well, right? So I think that's really key, and that's how I like to approach agencies, and also kind of how our team set it as well.
I think if I can just add to that, I think 100% right. And I think I'd take it a step further. I think where agencies sometimes forget, I think, Fred, you're 100% right, that the media platform does know their audience and their platform better than what you do. Whichever way you look at it, I think once you accept that, and I think you become open to that, I think you let them bring their value to that, right? And I think the other thing that agencies get very precious about, and again, agencies might not like hearing this, but trust me, if your client fires you at some point in time, they're going to carry on working with LinkedIn. LinkedIn's not going away. You might be going away. So I think that it is important, and I think, Fred, I think you mentioned at the beginning that clients should have a direct relationship with their biggest media owners. It's critical. It should never be buffered through the agency, because the moment you might have a fallout with your agency and you part ways with your agencies, now all of a sudden that becomes an issue for you as a client. So 100% on board.
Great, thank you for that, Chris and Frederick. Yeah, that element of trust is so critical. We have another question from one of the attendees, Kamalo, and this is to everyone. And her question says, transparency between agency, publisher, and client. How important is every detail? Are rebates a thing of the past? Value-added inventories based on spends, ? Which is a hot topic. So does anyone want to tackle that?
I think I can jump in.
Okay,
Go
you go.
Sorry, I think I also dropped off earlier. Apologies for that. It's a very hot one, certainly. I think the details, that's where the devil is. It's important to ensure everyone is aware of the details. We've seen that, as mentioned earlier, agencies, we used to be the owners of a lot of the information. Chris, you said it doesn't make absolute sense for us to be a barrier for growth. If the client so wishes to have a direct relationship with LinkedIn, TikTok, whichever publisher, they should, and they deserve that. The value, if your value is more of paper pushing, then certainly, you probably lose the opportunity to serve the client. So it's important to ensure that it's very clear what we're getting from, say, X publisher, and the agency, the client is aware of the same. In terms of the rebates, I think a lot of clients are aware that agencies do negotiate rebates, on behalf of their businesses. So some clients will want a share of the same, They want transparency of how much rebates did you get? What percentage are we getting out of these rebates? Some clients will, negotiate that as they're negotiating the fees. For example, if you're doing a commission-based model or a flat rate model, that will probably come. So we've seen a lot of clients move away from commission-based, because commission-based is geared towards spends, and then it's in everyone's interest then as an agency to spend more without necessarily driving value. So we've seen where the client is more inclined towards, here's a flat rate, then you can negotiate your rebates from wherever you're working with on the side, if that's okay with you. But I believe we're in the age of transparency. It's very important for everyone to be aware of the deals that you're making, because sometimes the client becomes the agency, and the agency becomes a client, or the platform becomes a client. So people move around the industry. So, and I think it's quite an open secret that these are the deals that are negotiated. Yeah.
Thanks, Fred. Chris, anything to add?
Yeah, I think if we go back, we'll talk about it a little bit later on. I think if you go back to where the industry was 6-7 years ago, I think that this was a huge problem, right? I mean, a lot of you will have read the ANA report that came out, I think it was about 6 years ago, that was scathing of agencies and the rebates that they were earning and how basically media got skewed. So I think that was a low point for a lot of agencies. So for me, it's about what we've seen since then is that a lot of clients actually take these platforms on board, right? So let's use GMP as an example. A lot of clients now have their own Google management platform where they manage all their campaigns through it themselves, and they give their agency access to it. So I think that sort of clarity and transparency, I think, has helped the relationship a great deal. I think when it comes to things like rebates, I think so. Our approach as a group has always been, listen, rebates, we're happy to have a discussion around it, but it has to be, going back to my 4 legs of the chair, it needs to bring value to everybody, right? So you, Mr. Media Owner, you need to get more spend out of it. Us as an agency, if the rebate gets set up, there needs to be a benefit for the agency, there needs to be a benefit for the media owner, there needs to be a benefit for the client. In other words, it's not this thing that the client doesn't know about and you scaling money in the back end. It's about how do we bring, if as a group and a collective we spend more money, what value can we bring to our clients, to you as a media owner, and to ourselves as an agency? Then it becomes a win-win. Otherwise, it's cheap and nasty, and I don't think we steer away from those.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think it's it's on all actors within the ecosystem, right, to make sure that we all benefit from it, right? So it shouldn't be that the advertiser negotiates a contract with the agency that is to the detriment of the agency's business. So they have to then find other ways of making money. And then again, it's also not to the betterment of the publisher to then try to skimp on media in that sense, or trying to cut out margins or add margins or buffers into it either. So I think it's everyone's here for to bring the industry forward, right? So I think we all have to appreciate we are all the client, the agency, and the publisher. We're all commercial entities, right? We all have to do things that are right for our shareholders and our various interests within our business. So I think we have to just respect that and make sure that the partnerships that we strike are benefit for all 4 legs of the chair, as Chris put it.
Great, thank you guys. And just to the audience, thank you for your questions. Please keep them coming. But Chris, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the common misconceptions people have, and how do you think we combat these misconceptions and communicate more effectively?
I think that's a very broad question. So I think there's a lot of them. For me, I think the one that is driving me insane at the moment, I think, is the viewability discussion. I think that viewability versus value, let's call it that. I think that's where there's which is a hot topic. I think so many people are buying on really basic metrics and weighing people up on CPM or whatever metric you use, right? Versus looking at actual value that the campaign delivers. I mean, we've had so many problems with this. So I think for me, that if you said what's a hot topic, is how the viewability issues for me is a big thing. I mean, I saw a study yesterday that spoke about connected TV in the US, that they found that something like 10% of the inventory that was delivered on connected TV in the US was delivered when the television was actually off. So you go listen, dude, and you go, well, listen, I delivered a great CPM or a CPC. I think that's where I think we there's a lot of work for us as an industry to do, and it's a debate that I feel like I'm sometimes bashing my head against a wall. So for me, it's about, if you said what's the one thing I'd like us to chat about and get over and done with, is how do we get viewability measurement right? How do we have a standardization view of viewability, and really go back to delivering value back to our clients again?
Great, thank you, Chris. Fred, back to you. Do you remember a specific experience of where you wish that you and your organization had done something differently? And if you were to do it over again, what would you change?
A very good question. I think one of the things that we've seen in the last couple of years is in-housing, where the client opts to keep some specialties within the businesses, and then reaching out to agencies for specific other services. I think reflecting on that, one of the things agencies, our strongest proposition is around strategy and creative and media. We have specialists. If you look at most agency structures, what you have at the very top are very people who've been there for decades of years. For example, agencies, we tend to attract the best creative directors because you give variety, as opposed to a client where the creative director is stuck up with one, kind of color, and they have to keep thinking of this logo to make it more fun, right? So with agencies, we tend to attract most of the creative directors. We tend to structure a lot of the strategists. Same thing for media planners. I think one of the things is to position ourselves mainly as specialists, as thinkers, not doers. Most of the time we go in for pitches, we have top thinkers, we get the business, we go down to the day-to-day business as usual, which then I think probably the clients then feels they're not getting the same value they got promised when the pitch was being done. So one of the things we are consciously investing is in this transition of how do we continuously position ourselves as thinkers, and not just as digital marketers, but as marketers in a digital world. Because we have to be honest that the touch points are multiple. In Africa, the most advanced economies, you find that internet penetration is about half of the nation. In other countries, as low as 10%, which means that you have another 90% of the population that is outside the internet ecosystem. So if you're trying to propose solutions to the client, I think the solution, you have to be channel independent. You have to be loyal to trying to solve the problem regardless of the channel, and then looking at a more integrated approach to it, and then leaning towards your specialist services, your specialist teams, to be able to provide the client with a solution that is going to be more valuable to them in the long run. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Great learnings. And Frederick, I'd love to ask you the same.
So a number of years ago, I was the previous role, not with LinkedIn, it was a previous company I was working for. I had a sales director who actively tried to bypass the agency in a big brand partnership we were doing with a consumer technology company. And he was like, we're just going to go and pitch this straight to them. Like, we don't need to work with this agency because like they don't understand the value we're bringing. So I'm just going to go pitch it directly. He'd done this in previous markets where he'd been operating. And I knew from speaking to the agency prior, like whatever we put forward to the brand would then bring to the agency. There was a large media component to this brand partnership. It was a content partnership and a media partnership. So I knew if this proposal went straight to the brand and then they pushed it back to the agency would seem, they would kind of be caught off guard, right? Then they would, and that's, the one thing you learn from like day one in advertising media sales, like don't keep the agency in the dark and don't bring any surprise on them, because that never ends well in your favor, right? So I tried to convince my sales director, okay, let me just share it with the agency prior for us sending it straight to the client. So like they're aware. He's like, no, like they won't screw it up. So like I will go straight to them. So I had to actually go behind his back. And I had an off the record call with the client director at the agency, like, this is what we're going to propose. This is what we're going to send. Like, I will share this with you, like the day after we sent it to the brand. So you're aware before you get it from them. I'm like, I've done what I can, but there's no way I can kind of convince him otherwise. So I had to literally go behind his back a little bit to kind of save the relationship and also my personal reputation, right? Because there's also, as a salesperson, that's what you live and breathe and die by, right? So I was like, I'll be in this market long after he has come and gone. And I'm like, I need to kind of look after number one and make sure the agent was happy. So like in hindsight, I think we would have probably done it differently, but that's again, kind of the one thing I came to think about.
Great. And then just by way of comparison, do you remember something that you've done or something that you wish everyone was doing, and why?
So I think it's going back to what I talked about before, right? I think we have a number of really strong kind of three-party kind of relationships with our key agencies and advertisers, right? And it could be from the large network agencies or even the independents, right? Where we're all on the same page. We're all kind of collaborating. We could even have like joint chats and Teams channels for this, right? Where we really are super open, super transparent, and we're all trying to deliver value to all three parties, but ultimately to our customer. And I think the more kind of close collaboration we can do, the more kind of joint business agreement we can close between ourselves, the agency and the client, where we're all on the same page, I think that's where we can really drive impact and benefit. So yeah, difficult to point the finger on one particular case. Yeah, we've got a number of them now, and I think it's why we as a platform invest into our agency team and into our sales team to make sure that we can continue to drive these kind of longer term partnerships, because that's where we can have real impact and drive real business value to our advertisers.
Fantastic. I want to transition to another question from one of our viewers. They say, relationships, is there time for fun? Lunches, conference trips, sports events, what's okay and what's not okay? I'll start with you, Chris.
Okay, cool. Listen, I think you probably picked up it already. I'm all for seeing people face to face. And again, we should be interacting with people. We should be, so I'm all for having fun, right? Because I think that's, again, where creativity and innovation comes through, right? So I'm a big believer in having fun. So yes, please, by all means. I think where from an agency perspective, where I think the narrative has changed a lot is around the transparency when it comes to this sort of thing. Nowadays, so if I'll give you a silly example, if we have a policy within our company, so if I go on a trip or on a lunch or something like that, and the value exceeds a certain amount, I have to put something in paper, right? And I have to submit it to my boss's boss, and it gets signed off. And I think, so for me, it's about setting these things in place that protects us, right? Because we also have the flip side to it, where people get bribed and media money gets moved by bribery. So I think 100%, to answer a short question in a very long way, I think there is definitely a place for fun, as long as it's done in an open and transparent way. I think, yeah.
Brilliant. Anything to add?
With Chris? Sorry, Samantha. People buy from people. I think that's a bottom line. Buy from people that they share something common with them. So sometimes you may be, like playing golf with your client, watching F1 with your client. I think we cannot do all these things with certain borderlines, professional borderlines, and just striving to genuinely build that relationship. And I'm sure if you look at it from a quantifiable perspective, it does drive a lot of your client retention, not just acquisition. And if you genuinely invest in that, I think the fruits are quite clear. As a business, we actually have a relationship budget in the agency where we've set aside some money for the respective teams are client facing, where they can actually take a client for lunch or for an extracurricular activity, whatever it is, as long as Chris said, it's within a certain figure, because then it can easily be construed as trying to bribe or influence some certain decisions. But yeah, I think generally we have to invest in relationships.
Monaco Grand Prix maybe next year, Fred.
Brilliant.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking Cape Town soon, maybe in 2 years' time.
I'll come down for that as well. Don't worry.
Brilliant, guys. All right, there have been so many more questions from viewers, and we are running out of time. We're not going to have a chance to get to all of them, but thank you so much for the great engagement. I think we'll have time for 2 more questions. I know, Chris, that you have answered this, but I'm going to ask our other 2 panelists, what is the question you are most tired of hearing on the subject, and what would you like to say about it so that you never have to answer this question again? I think, Chris, you covered viewability, but Frederick, is there anything that you would want to add, that question you're most tired of hearing?
I think it's great question. I think one of the things for me personally is is this the year of the death of the agency, right? There was a few years ago, there was in-housing is the way forward. Every brand will in-house, and the agencies will have nothing to do, right? They don't deliver value, so let's just bring everything in-house. And then we have a number of clients who try to do it. They actually ended up hiring more people in the agency to kind of help deliver some of the in-housing that they've delivered. And I think over the past few years, I think the agencies that we work with have had to reevaluate and engineer their business model somewhat, right? Because long are the days where you had, commission and all these other kind of revenue sources, and they've had to come up with a new way of servicing their customers. And that's why we've seen the likes of the 𝐼𝐞'𝐥𝐥 acquisition, or, when Dentsu acquired Merkle. And I think they've now reinvented themselves to some extent and have a much stronger status within the ecosystem. And you can just look at the way the market cap of Publicis, how that's evolved over the years, like looking at the S4 Capital Group with Media Monks and how they've grown over the years. But I think the agencies is definitely not on the downturn or on the way out. I think they are in a resurgence. So this whole kind of notion of the future's in-housing and everything should be just done within the client, I think it's a little bit tired at the moment. Hopefully it's something that we don't have to kind of talk about moving forward.
Yeah.
Lovely. Fred, anything to add?
I think one of the ones we don't like hearing is, can you guarantee the results? And now that we're talking about publisher, agency relationship, I think some publishers have a lot of control, I think, in terms of inventory, in terms of placement and traffic. And I believe if they can also take that, I think we all don't want to hear the conversation about guaranteeing, but if agencies and publishers, we can look at some of your unsold inventories that is sitting idle, and then structure a way to sell this inventory on a guarantee model and just place it a bit higher. If the client's willing to pay, say, a cost per acquisition of $50, probably better than if you work it down all the way to a CPM of $2. Maybe the CPM, you probably make more out of it if you have, I believe, the right infrastructure in terms of data, segmentation, creative personalization, and so forth. So I think as a conversation evolves, something that both parties could explore in terms of those kind of partnerships.
Fantastic. And then my last question to all of our amazing panelists: what do you think is the number one way we can make a substantial difference? So as our last question, just a quick round. Chris, we'll start with you.
For me, I think it boils down to return on marketing investment. I think for me, that's very, very simply where I think what we get measured against. So in terms of sustainability, I think it's about really putting our clients' priorities and making sure as our top priority, and making sure that we deliver return of value to our client. I think that's where it begins and ends. So I would say for me, that would be our top priority going forward.
Great. Frederick?
So I'm looking at two things, actually. One is building on Chris's point, right? Looking at how do we drive concrete business value to the customers and the advertisers, right? Not looking at media metrics and kind of vanity metrics. It's actually looking at what's the actual return on investment, and how do we actually drive value? And that's kind of from all individual interactions that we do. I think secondly is how do we rebuild trust in our industry, and that's actually from a consumer perspective, right? I think we need to kind of rebuild trust with the consumers in order for kind of the entire industry to thrive. And I think that's looking at how we manage first-party data and how that is being controlled and managed by agencies, by brands, and by platforms. I think that's really key. That's an existential thing for us as an industry, right? If there's no trust between us and the consumer, then it's a bit tricky to drive business value and return on investment.
Fantastic. And Fred?
I think mine would be around having open conversations with all the parties. Agencies are not magicians. Clients are not unreasonable. I think it's just both parties being open with one another in terms of expectations, disappointments, or any areas of concern. Just being able to, I think, raise the issues, and then having an open conversation, candid conversations of what's possible and what's not possible. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much to all three of you. I have thoroughly enjoyed our time together today, and I'm sure everyone has gained significant insights. Thank you all for joining this panel, and I'm going to hand over to you, Wanjira.
Thank you so much, Samantha. That was quite the hot topic. We saw how interested our audience is, and I've also learned quite a bit. To our panelists, Frederick, Chris, and Fred. I'm really hoping we'll get to see you again, because this is a conversation that, is very complex, and everyone wants to understand how they can derive value from, from this relationship. To our amazing audience, we have come to the end of this discussion and this session. Thank you so much for making the time to, attend and listen in and engage with us. For those who may have joined in a bit late, we will post a link to our Turn Left Media company profile. Please feel free to go and rewatch it later. Engage us in the comment section. Should you want to also further the discussion, please connect with any of our panelists, myself or Samantha, on LinkedIn, and we are happy to also assist you. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Lovely day.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Vijay. Thanks, Samantha.
Bye, guys.